Hello, good morning, people. It's Zach Elliott from Feel Free to Argue. And this morning, I wanted to relay one of my favorite stories from Ron Suskind's Way of the World. There's a point where he spends a lot of time looking at the life of this young Pakistani guy who moves over to the United States. He's pretty much a child of privilege, so he does pretty well over here as well. Ends up working for one of these think tanks that tries to influence government policy over here. He's a fairly, prosperous young guy, living the life of somebody who works for a think tank in Washington. So, he's fairly well off. As a consequence, people who come to visit this country, he often tries to hook them up, with experiences when they come over here. So at one point his friend calls him up. He says, I got a couple people in from out of town, and you know where all the good parties are. I want you to help me out. So he offers to help out this friend, with his two friends from out of town, from Pakistan. So when he gets there, he finds out that they have kind of an unusual request and a fairly typical one. The unusual request is that they want to eat halal, meaning they want to have a properly blessed Muslim meal. A little bit of a trick, fairly late on a Friday evening, but he's able to manage it. But they wanted to be able to eat halal before they go to a strip club. So, he of course looks at the obvious hypocrisy of this, and he says, this is why I've been considering actually dropping my faith, because of, stupid hypocrisy like this at the center of our religion. And here comes one of the creepier segments of the book, because he says this kind of in a huff as he goes off to do something. So this leaves the friend who asked for help with his two associates from out of town who want to eat halal and then go to the strip club. And one of the friends from out of town says, he used to be Muslim, didn't he? Yeah, well, if we kill him, we get to go straight to heaven. Because, they have this, policy about people who leave the faith that, if you kill them, that's one of your free tickets to get into heaven. And, of course, his friend is very upset about this, and part of the deal for the rest of the evening is trying to get him away so this doesn't occur. But it was interesting how these people who are being helped by a stranger can instantly turn on him because of their religion and think that it's okay to kill this guy, just so that they can get into heaven. But I think this actually points to a lot of interesting problems, and probably the chief one that I've always found with religion, in the sense that it tries to control the sexual behavior of people. Most religions do this. And I think the relationship is that what you need to do in order to have a successful religion is you need to try to get people to control something that they can't control. If you look back through the sum total of human history, you could go back as far as you want, as far as there are recorded instances of, human interaction, and the stories are very much the same. You could go back to the points of, the ancient Greek poets, or anywhere you want, in written history, where they're talking about men and women being together, and you'll have the same stories, woman cheating on her husband, husband cheating on his wife, Sexual politics has actually evolved stunningly little, you know, in the last several thousand years. And I think that's because we're, to a large extent, you know, most of these responses are, you know, programmed. Even I think the level of our lust, I think, is largely, you know, programmed. Let me give you an interesting anecdote from recent scientific discoveries. There was this researcher who was studying voles, which is a small, you know, kind of mouse-like, you know, vermin out west. And there were two voles that lived fairly close to one another. And one vole was sort of a stay-at-home vole. Found one female vole, the male did, and you know, settled down with her and didn't look at other voles and basically mated for life. Living right nearby, there was this sort of tomcat vole. The vole who would just basically find and impregnate, you know, as many females as, you know, he could find. No loyalty, no, you know, staying with one female vole. So they transplanted a little bit of the DNA from the stay-at-home vole into the tomcat vole, and guess what? You get instant stay-at-home vole. Now, aside from the kind of, I don't know, scary implications of this for, you know, human genetic engineering, of being able to basically rip the sex drive out of people, what I think it does point to is that, well, I think it's funny because what's just about the weakest defense that anyone can imagine for someone who's just cheated on their spouse? I couldn't help myself. I mean, this is traditionally what's considered to be the absolute weakest, lamest excuse for you know, cheating on a spouse or loved one. And yet, if you look at this information and you think about what it means, that actually could be the case. Perhaps they did not have any choice, or at least they were dealing with a much greater challenge than somebody else was. The level of wanting to go out and have someone besides their spouse, I think, is legitimately much, much stronger in other people. Well, how does religion factor into this? Basically, I think once you start making rules about people's sexual behavior, you've basically tied into the number one perfect way of continuously enslaving them. Because you're trying to get them to control something which I don't think, honestly, people have any chance of controlling. It's sort of tying into the endless guilt supply. Because, I mean, in a lot of religions, you know, you're not even allowed to have impure thoughts. So, you know, even if you don't bang your neighbor, if you just look at her and think about banging her, you're still in trouble with God, you know, because he knows what you're thinking, and he knows that you're thinking of, like, you know, jumping on top of her when she's, like, pulling the weeds in her garden. And there's, you know, you don't have any control over that. You certainly don't have any control over your thoughts. You can't make yourself not think about, like, jumping your neighbor, you know, if you think she's attractive. You don't have any choice in the matter. And so what religion has done by trying to control sexual behavior is just tied into the endless guilt supply. And the guilt supply is what keeps people coming back to church, because, you know, you go out, you look at your neighbor, you think about having sex with her, it's like, oh God, I did it again this week, more sinning, have to go back to church, have to give money, have to apologize to God for the impure thoughts that I'm having about my neighbor. And you're never going to be able to control it, because, you know, if you're not looking at your neighbor, you're looking at, you know, some person in a magazine, you know, you say, oh, well, there, I looked at Lindsay Lohan, and oh no, now I got to go back to church because I thought about, you know, screwing her like every other man has. And, just think it's interesting, you know, that I think any religion that is trying to control sexual behavior of people is just doing so because that is the one absolutely surefire, 100% successful way that you can ensure that people are never going to be able to follow your rules, and therefore they're going to be constantly out of grace, seeking grace, trying to get like the spheres back in alignment, trying to get back to a situation where, you know, they feel comfortable and they feel like they're okay with God. Anyway, those are my thoughts for the morning. Hope everybody's having a good day, except for my vote botter. And we'll be talking to you all again soon. This is Zach Elliott, and you can feel free to argue.